Vans, like a sounding American brand, a subculture brand. I've had Vans, I don't know, maybe since high school. One of the things when we talked previously, you said that everyone who wears Vans sort of has their story, like how they came to your brand. What would you start off telling us, just sort of your own story, how you first became aware of Vans, how you fell in love with them, how the brand became part of your life?
Yeah, sure. I've always been into music and played music since I was a kid, but I've also been into skateboarding all my life. And I actually came in contact with Vans. We used to go to the US on vacation, and I came to the US to mainly go to the outlets to get Vans because you couldn't get them. I'm from Germany, in case you wonder where my accent is coming from. But it was hard to get Vans at the time in Germany. So we would come over, and I would sort of come back with a full suitcase full of Vans, because that's who I looked up to, at the time. Two skateboarders that I very much looked up to, John Cardiel and Ray Barbie, were wearing Vans, and those were sort of my idols, at the time. They donned my bedroom and the walls, and I wanted to be like them. So that was my foray into Vans, and I'm glad that I can work for them, and I have worked for them for over a decade and a half so far.
Wow, talk about landing your dream job and your dream brand. So it's my understanding, as you said, skateboarding sort of always been at the heart of the brand, and in the 70s, it was really adopted as part of the subculture in Southern California. Maybe if you could tell us a little bit about that store, how the direct consumer model sort of launched yourself into that subculture, and then how you've thought about subcultures now that you're a global presence rather than a local one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, happy Go Skateboarding Day, because June 21st is actually when the world is celebrating skateboarding, and that's today. So it's kind of perfect and fitting, because yeah, you're right. When Paul Van Doren started the brand in California, when he moved over from the East Coast, he was actually revolutionary in as much as that he opened a store, but he had the factory in the back. So the brand actually started with the ability to make any kind of shoe that you wanted. You could bring fabric to the store, and Paul would basically go and make the shoes for you. And it was at the time that basically the skateboarders, specifically people like Tony Alva, actually adopted the shoe for the sticky rubber sole, and they really adopted the brand. They sort of started building a relationship, and actually used to come into the store because they would wear Tony would wear one of the shoes out more than the other, and we would actually give him just not even pairs, just one shoe to replace the one he was wearing out, because that was the way he was skating. And really, since then, that relationship with skateboarding and with surfing is just continued to grow, and we've supported the community and the culture of skateboarding ever since, through its ups and downs.
Absolutely. And while you're in Southern California, skateboarding and surfing, especially then, were the main subculture. But now you're in every corner of the world, rather it's hardcore punk rock scenes in Japan. How do you still resonate with so many and such diverse subcultures so effectively when they're different? They're different everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. We as a brand, our purpose is really that of enabling creative self-expression, and we have some brand pillars that are very true to the brand. So alongside the action sports piece, where skateboarding, surfing, snowboarding, and BMX is part of, we also have art, music, and street culture. So when I say the brand was sort of adopted by skateboarders and surfers, and we've never looked back since, that's really the ethos on how we approach and we connect with our consumers. And really how we support those communities that are supporting us, right? So we have a big thing at Vans where we really listen to our consumers, internal, and external. Our athletes, our ambassadors have a big say. And when we create brand platforms, when we create campaigns, they're very much a part of the creation process. And I think because of that, we're very much connected to youth culture. It's a two-way street, and honestly, those athletes, those ambassadors really keep us, moving forward and keep us changing and connecting with them and sort of connecting with those communities out there. So, and I think you said it, like that's where sort of the story comes in, where everyone has a story about their Vans, whether they landed their first trick or they, went to a music festival, they listened to their first band, because Vans are sort of authentically there as our consumers are going through their journey. And that's where we get inspiration. Those are the stories that we tell. That's the content that we're producing and supporting.
That's awesome. So one of your major athletes, one of your, I don't know if official but or not, spokesperson, Tony Hawk, major skateboarder, has just had his a release of the enterprise of his video games, and you're seeing competitions, esports of this game, your brand in the game. How are you thinking about engaging into that ecosystem while still staying super authentic to who you are?
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and actually one that is just so fascinating, how the game has really stayed through sort of the test of time. I mean, I remember playing the game right when I was a kid, when I was at college, and it's funny, now my son is playing it, and he's 8 years old, by the way, and is loving it for exactly the same reasons, why just the game is so great. And I think that is a good example of how we show up through our communities, through our ambassadors. When the decision was made to sort of re-release the game, where we were like, okay, well, how can we help you? How can we support you? How can we be a part of telling the story? And something that was important to Tony and to us was also to make sure that there is diversity in the game. So there's actually another character in there, Lizzie Amanto, that you can play, who is hugely successful and has really been pushing forward what female skateboarding is today. So those opportunities present themselves to us as we're a part, as we're listening to what's going on. But you sort of move to the other side of the world, you move to a place like Asia, where mobile gaming is big. It might not be a skate game, it might be a different mobile game or a different platform. But again, usually we show up through sort of that connectivity to the platforms that we have. So a lot of, obviously, our athletes are gamers themselves. They're playing, so we support them through that. But we're also putting our content where they are. So we have an event called the Vans Park Series that wasn't just streamed sort of on YouTube. We also streamed that on a platform like Twitch, because we know that's where our consumers are. And not only that, we also use sort of the commentators who were sort of authentically in that space, to bring a sort of another level of exclusivity to it, So it's really like understanding where the audience is and how do you show up in an authentic way on those platforms and where they're consuming.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of people made a lot of adjustments to their physical footprint, to the world as large, as a lot of the world had to stay inside. Could you tell everyone a little bit about the 66 project and how you use your physical locations to stay true to that sort of like promoting the creator's brand?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess during COVID, many of us were faced with the situation where the physical just wasn't possible. And for us as a brand, that was a real challenge, because we love events. This brand is built on on grassroots. You know, we often say we'd rather build a skate park than run a Super Bowl ad, you know, and that sort of runs very much throughout the, you know, our strategies and how we show up with our consumers is really through that in real life experience. And we've built a lot of experience. So you can imagine when COVID happened, it wasn't just I mean, it was a disaster generally, you know, and a tough one for a brand to show up. But for us in particular, you know, we had premieres scheduled. We have venues like the House of Vans in London and Chicago that are open, you know, all throughout the week and the year. So events and grassroots is very key to our strategy. So we actually had to shift quite a bit during COVID to really figure out how do we still bring an experience that is just as engaging, you know, if not more engaging. So we looked at quite a few of our platforms and we just rewrote and, you know, redid a lot of the playbooks that we had. So, you know, you mentioned Channel 66, that's really a digital live stream that is broadcasting, you know, weekdays from New York City, from Chicago, from Mexico City, from Los Angeles, and it's using our spaces that, you know, were closed. So like I say, House of Vans is something where you usually go and you skate or you listen to a show or you go to, you know, to an art show. So we basically flipped that. And it was also a way for us to uplift some of those communities and support the creators and the artists that were really hit, obviously, extremely hard, right, by COVID in general. But we also pivoted to, you know, live streaming in general of our content. And we'd sort of always done that, but we still did, you know, video premieres in movie theaters around the world, right? And that's a whole nother opportunity because all of a sudden you could actually have sort of a global pizza party with everyone, you know, watching whatever piece of content we were putting out and engage that way, you know, and have Q&As or completely rethink how we did things. You know, we run a surf competition in Hawaii called the Vans Triple Crown of Surfing that really is run for decades. And, you know, during the lockdown, it was impossible to run that contest, right, physically. So we actually pivoted to making that a digital contest and invited our consumers in to be able to vote, you know, which had to change the format of what that has been sort of from a traditional, you know, on the beach with, you know, some judges judging and, you know, sort of at the end, the winner getting crowned. And those were all really good learnings for us. It's now really, how do you sort of augment, you know, as we're starting to think how we go back, it's really sort of challenged us to think about how do you augment the real life experience, right, with the online and the digital experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, normally we would be doing this over a glass of rosé in person in the French Riviera. Next year, I owe you a glass of rosé. I'm happy to do that. So it sounds like there's been just a ton of experimentation, a lot of pivoting, really being focused on your consumer. Is there anything, and I have a number of more questions about really cool things that succeeded, but was there anything that you guys tried that just, you know, fell on its face, that got out of the boardroom, got out of the experiment and just didn't land?
Yeah, we fail all the time. You know, I would just say we definitely have a test and learn mentality. And I think that's sort of the beauty of the brand, is that ideas can really come from anywhere, you know, and we try different things and if they stick, they usually get adopted, you know, sort of around the world in the different regions. So I would say something that was and is interesting, because there's a lot of talk around sort of shop streaming, right, and online selling, which is something that actually in places like China is working extremely well, you know, as you're sort of moving more into the Western world and you're trying those things out, that's still I would say a tough space, you know, to sort of get scale on that, especially as, you know, you are still figuring out what are the right platforms, how do you integrate that into the storytelling you've got going on, how much how much selling do people really want, or how much do they want to consume, like an interview like we're doing right now, or finding out more about your product. So I would say that's probably the one space where we've got, I think in general, it's exciting, and I think it will grow rapidly, but it's probably still at its, at its infancy, at least for our industry.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you say ideas can come from anywhere. I feel like I have heard that from almost every corporation I've ever talked to, and it doesn't seem as though that's the case very often, but it seems like you have really interesting things coming out of regions, out of countries that are becoming global. How do you foster that? Is there an experiments line item budget? Is it anyone with an idea can run on it? Do you promote people who fail but fail fast? Like, how do you keep that central in a corporate culture, especially being such a global brand?
Yeah, I think it's sort of an approach of having the right balance between what is a strategy, what's a global strategy, what is our vision, right? Get everyone rallied around and really understanding that, but at the same time leaving enough space for the conversation and for this idea around really being locally relevant, in those communities. And a lot of the time, the ideas are coming out of the teams that are on the ground, that are seeing either a trend or, a partner or collaborators hit them up with an idea and they want to try something. And honestly, sometimes those things scale quick, sometimes those things really just stay as a local idea. And other times those things, take a little while to sort of, bloom and blossom, and they evolve over time as well. We spend a lot of time, talk a lot about sort of being a family at Vans. So we do spend a lot of time about coming together and sharing how are things working, how they're working for you, what can we do differently, how can we get better at things. But there's just so many examples where an idea would have started in one region, and then as another region takes it, they sort of make it almost better, and it grows. And honestly, as the consumer is telling us that they're interested in that as well. So an example of that is we have a program which is now called which is now global. It's called Musicians Wanted, and it actually started in Asia, almost as like an afterthought, because we had to program a house of Vans, and we do these pop-ups alongside the permanent locations that we have. We also do pop-ups. We go into communities and we just sort of do like week-long pop-ups where we show up. But we had like basically a gap in the music program, and this was when I was in Asia. And what I said to the team was, hey, it's sort of the good old battle of the bands. That's still a concept that works, right? When I was younger and played, that was exciting. Today, it's hard for new talent to be heard. So let's use our platform to uplift new talent. And that started in one location in Hong Kong at the time. We had some great response. We even had some musicians out of our own shops that formed the band just to play there, And it's sort of something that incubated, in Asia, but it got to a scale where really the other regions saw it. And because it was, even during COVID, such an opportunity to uplift and support, unsigned talent, we actually saw the 2020 competition having, I think, over 20,000 submissions, from musicians all over the world, all different kind of genres and backgrounds. And all because they wanted a chance to showcase their talent at House of Vans. They've obviously got some product from us and got support from some of our, bigger ambassadors who were actually the judges. But I think it just shows what the ability is when you mix sort of the digital and the physical together, but also when you allow an idea that's actually fairly simple, right, and to grow over time.
That's awesome. So you have a core of live events, you're doing live streaming now, you participate in user-generated content. There's some campaigns we can talk about, but first, how does a brand like Vans think about brand suitability and brand safety, and how to balance the risk associated when you're promoting so much content that as it's promoted is immediately out of your control?
Hmm. But being very rigorous, and very, very aware, I think in general, the world is changing at such a rapid pace where you have to make sure that you have the right checks and balances in place. And, everything from data privacy, right, to how you show up in the world. I think you are, as a marketeer, you're obliged to stay up with that, and that can be tough at times, right? Because especially as a global brand, that looks different depending on where you are, right, in the world, even in a country, right? In the US, that looks different in California to some of the other states. So it's definitely top of mind. We're thankful that we have a very strong relationship actually with our legal team. They're not even considered a legal team. They're really a business partner, and they're there every step of the way from the beginning of an idea all the way through the execution. Same with our digital teams, because you have to, and I don't think you're able to run any of these programs or platforms without making sure that you are covered, right? So and the consumers are expecting that from you as well, increasingly so.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, user generated campaigns. You had great success with 2 major campaigns recently: Off the Wall, the Van Shoebox Challenge. How do you go about engaging in that? How much of it is just natural and catching a wave? How much promotion back into the wave do you do? Could you tell me a little bit about how Vans runs these? Because I was at YouTube for forever, and before this, 15 years, and I'm at a startup. It's very exciting times. But how do you engage with that and make it successful and make it also, for your users, your customers, your community, rather than just marketing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, not everything you do, right, is a viral success. I would just say that, right? Like there is a lot you put out, and I think you can do a lot of social listening today. You can look at, okay, what are the trends? What do your consumers care about, right? TikTok is a great example where, right, the trends really happen very, very quickly. We refer to TikTok as skate talk, just because how actually the skate community has even picked that up as a platform, which is really interesting in its own right. But I would say something like the Shoebox Challenge was just a great example of one, really leaning into the emotional connectivity we have with our consumers in general. We do generally see a high engagement with us as a brand from a UGC perspective. But it was also, right, during COVID, there wasn't much you could do. Chances were that a lot of people had shoeboxes kicking around. We were all looking for things even internally, or things to do with our kids, and just ourselves as teams. And we put out coloring books and things like that. But the Shoebox Challenge is just a great example that just really hit a spot. And I think what's remarkable for us was it wasn't just like these, like 10-minute things that people were doing. Some of the stuff that people were putting out were like fully laminated skateboards that took weeks, to make. So people took it like really, really serious. And there wasn't a grand prize or anything, really at the end. It was just be creative. We're all in this together, and show us your creation. So, that was, and then obviously as things were coming in, we were sharing and resharing that content and sort of uplifting what our favorite pieces were. So I would say that was a really great example of just seeing, people are stuck at home, right? Overlaying some of the social listening that we were saying, and then leaning into it and making that something that actually lasted. It's actually still ongoing, as you when you follow the hashtag, it's interesting. There's still people doing it now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you mentioned social listening tools, and something I asked you about was, how you stay on top of and ahead of fashion, right? I've read Pattern Recognition by William Gibson, but other than being a nerd, I don't really know much about fashion. Where you suddenly couldn't have people in the streets, people out there on trend, how did that affect that brand? And how much does that even drive your brand where the iconic things, the canvas fabric, the rubber soles have been really classic and really ubiquitous for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I would say when COVID first hit, like probably everyone, right, we had to stop and really rethink, what does this mean? What might it mean? What does the curve look like? What does demand potentially look like? And just how many stories do we have out there? What are the stories that are frankly not going to work? What might be, right, tone deaf putting out in a situation where people, right, can't go to concerts or maybe even given stories. So we had to like rework really again sort of that playbook pretty much on a weekly basis, and that was hard because no one has sort of, it's already crystal ball, right? Like looking forward, our industry, our go to market largely is on sort of an 18-month cycle. So there are a lot of bets you place generally as sort of a fashion brand anyway, right? Because you're definitely taking signals and you're seeing what is going on, but you're also part of driving culture forward, right? So it isn't just all reactive. It's also, again, listening to what do our consumers want, but also what do our athletes want, right? When we go and do a signature shoe of an athlete, that's their shoe. We support them with their vision, and or when we work with a collaborator to bring that to life. So it's you're only as good as you surround yourself with the people that you surround yourself, right? And I think we're very lucky that we have sort of a lot of those signals and the people internally and externally that we can pull from that sort of help us stay grounded and bring a little bit of organization to the chaos that's generally out there. But yeah, that's what COVID provided us, and honestly has definitely made us in some areas maybe a little bit more agile, and given us sort of the ability to sort of also maybe leave some old things behind that you just did for the sake of doing, right? I mean, even just traveling, right? If you think about, we would be traveling a lot just to meet with each other and discuss things, now we do them all virtually. And as much as we miss each other, that's also given a different set of opportunities.
And so sometimes marketing's doing the right thing, and you talked about thinking what would be right and what would be tone deaf as we were dealing with this. How did the Foot the Bill campaign come around, and can you share a little bit about how it went?
Yeah, so the Foot the Bill was really it was our way on how we felt we could best support those that were hit hardest, that supported us over the years. And that started with skate shops. Vans would not be where we are today if we wouldn't have had the support from the skate community. And when COVID hit and we were hearing all these stories where honestly our friends couldn't pay rent and they couldn't really keep up with all the demands, right? Because there's maybe not a lot of cash reserves, or at least in the beginning people weren't spending, and they weren't necessarily maybe buying skateboards, although that definitely changed during COVID. They've had a really great year, as I think people have discovered the skateboard as a great thing to do. Our answer to that was, okay, well, what can we do? How can we support those communities? So we actually took our customs platform that is sort of agile anyway, in the way that, right, you, Michael, can go, you can design a shoe, and a couple of weeks later that pair of shoes is going to show up on your doorstep with your design. So the whole the whole process around customs is very agile. But we basically flipped that and said, hey, we're going to support the businesses, starting with skate shops, and then we sort of broadened that as time went on to, venues, independent venues, independent just communities in general, restaurants, etc. People that, were close and were part of what we would deem our extended family. And we let their communities buy those shoes. So they got to create a pair of shoes, right? And then the consumer in the community could basically go and support their favorite business and essentially sort of, shop local through this customs program. And, we essentially gave that money back to them. And in some instances, it saved their business, just getting enough money to pay for that next rent check, really helped them through it. So it's definitely something we were really proud of. And we did footwear and apparel actually together, as well as that sort of scaled. So just a great example of, how when you refocus and you have an agile mindset, what you can really do. But again, lucky that we had sort of that digital platform that we could lean into and double down on as a, it's sort of a real differentiator for us as a brand anyway. But it sort of really doubled down and reinforced our purpose of, as a brand in general and what we mean by supporting communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it is really amazing, y'all considering your partners in real partnership and making sure that they're still here on the other side of this. Now that I'm maybe not supposed to say we're on the other side of this. There's a lot of challenge and suffering going on around the world, everywhere. But looking forward, are y'all scheduling live events now? What are you most excited coming up? Can you tell me who's playing at Warped Tour next year? Where is Vans in that cycle, or is it still sort of like wait and see?
We are, I would say we are definitely focused on sort of this digital first approach, remaining consumer centric and going and being where our consumers are, right? So whether that you mentioned gaming, whether that is gaming or whether that is doubling down on making sure we've got the right infrastructure, right, to continue to lean into that. We'll reopen and go back to, in-person events as we're able to do that, as, the local governments and the local countries allow us to do that, and we can do that in a safe way. So I can't tell you yet sort of what's coming up because we'll have to continue to play it by ear, right? But depending on where we're going, we're definitely going to double down on making sure that the connection is there between that real life experience and the ability that we have to amplify our message digitally, right? And I think again, skateboarding is a great example, and in that where, today actually we just launched our Go Skateboarding campaign, or Go Skateboarding Day. We launched our campaign to remind people how important skateboarding is and where it's coming from, and never really forgetting where it starts. So, and again, it's just such a great example of how we are supporting, communities. In this case, we're teaming up with Skateistan, who's really if you haven't watched the documentary on them, I would highly suggest everyone to watch the documentary. Their award-winning film on them, but it's such a great institution that is really empowering youth through skateboarding and education, started in Afghanistan, Cambodia, South Africa, but just supporting communities around the world. So we launched that today. As you'll see, skateboarding continue to grow with the months ahead of where it's going to go, right? I think we all know where it's going to show up here in 4 weeks time in Japan. We just want to make sure that we continue to double down on supporting and being there as a brand in the communities that help build skateboarding and us as a brand. So that's not going to go away. Grassroots will remain.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can ask one last question. So forward looking and talking about digital infrastructure and you being where your audience is, I mean, this year or in the last year or so, we've seen Marshmello, Travis Scott give concerts in Fortnite. I've been to a conference, like a work conference in Roblox. We're seeing sort of, I'm paid to talk about the metaverse, but the metaverse sort of subsume and engage in some of these communities. Is Vans looking at these platforms? And if so, how?
Yes, we are. And it's maybe a little bit too early for me to divulge some of the details. So maybe we'll have to come back next year and tell you how it's going there. But yes, I think the general world of right, as a brand that has, again, real, right, analog product, as the kids call it, whereas the digital product, right, which is a fascinating space. So I would say NFTs, the metaverse in general, the gaming platforms are all things for us to look at. We actually just did something around Bitmojis and just used our Pride collection as the opportunity to release that digitally. So, if you haven't gotten your Vans Bitmoji yet and you haven't tried your Pride collection on, digitally, I would definitely suggest you go and do that. But that's, again, just a great example where, we did 12 outfits and we've seen huge success. People really like it because, again, everyone wants to show up digitally how they show up in the real world, right? So now you can dress your avatar with some of your Vans clothes.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, thank you so much for taking the time with me today. This has been super exciting and a real honor. Andrea, thank you for having me as a moderator.
Yeah, of course. Thank you both, Nick and Michael. This was a great session, great discussion. Really interesting to hear from me just how Vans originated and how it grew into this global brand. Also, love hearing how you guys are fostering new ideas and them coming from anywhere. And that House of Bands thing sounds really cool. I got to tell some musician folks that that you guys are doing that, or some folks that have been signed. Great examples of really kind of bringing those ideas to fruition and bring them to a global stage from anywhere. So thank you both so very much. This brings us to the end of day one for Brand Innovators Cannes, which has been a great day. So thank you, everyone. We've had an incredible day of programming and content from our speakers and moderators, great insights and discussion from a variety of categories, food and beverage, healthcare, direct-to-consumer, restaurants, retail, fashion. I think we covered a lot. One thing I feel like really resonated throughout the sessions was the need to be more inclusive in our messaging and to make it resonate more closely with consumers. That's what's really making an impact and so important. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please join us tomorrow. Tune in again, June 22nd, for day 2 of our Cannes Summit. It starts at 11:20 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be joined by marketing leaders from Kellogg's, Warner Media, Catalog, the Hershey Company, RBI, PepsiCo, Panera Bread, Capper, and many more. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Have a good evening.